Jetzt werden wir nach Brooklyn schalten, denn dort sitzt unser letzter Gesprächsgast der heutigen Konferenz. So I'm switching to English just to be a little bit more polite. I'm seeing this wonderful artist that, as all of you know, became famous a few years ago when he was even younger than now. He was just 23 when he was the first black American photographer to shoot a cover for American Vogue. And of course, it was the famous cover, now famous cover, starring Beyoncé. He has had his first solo show in Amsterdam just a few years later. Now he has he's showing works in 2 different cities. He has a solo show in New York at the moment, which we'll be talking about in a few moments, but also a group show in London. And I'm very happy he is taking his time to have a chat about his work and his life and his vision of Black Utopia. Welcome, Tyler Mitchell.
Thank you so much. And is Christoph here as well?
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're already live. You were listening to my voice.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, I love it.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you ZEITmagazin and ART COLOGNE Fair. And yeah, I'm doing pretty great. How are you?
Well, we're all good. We had some lovely talks and chats, and now we're looking forward to have a chat with you. Tyler, I mean, how has the pandemic been for you?
It's been, it's been full of ups and downs, but it's been a very creative period, to be honest. As you so aptly mentioned, I had a solo presentation at Foam Photography Museum in Amsterdam, which was a great opportunity to see how my work just spoke to people outside of the US. It was the first time sort of doing that. And then just before the pandemic, I opened an exhibition of the same body of work, a little bit expanded, at the International Center of Photography in New York. And, that got closed early due to the pandemic. So that was an emotional journey. But obviously things have really changed since the pandemic has begun for the importance of images in the world, right? Because we live now so much through photography in terms of our understanding of what's going on around the world. So I think my work has played an even greater purpose, and I feel very honored because of that.
I mean, it's true. Is it true that you were so shocked nearly by the opportunity to have a solo show at such a young stage in your career that you were thinking about saying no just because you were so surprised?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that being a photographer, sometimes I moved up to New York from Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I'm from, to be a filmmaker. So I went to film school. So sometimes I do see myself as this sort of outsider to the space in a way. And so also I was making images mostly in the fashion space. So to be invited by such a prestigious museum, in Amsterdam of all places, to do a solo presentation, it was daunting. You worry about what, I don't know, the art world will say about it, or what the sort of art photo world will think of your work. And yeah, it was a huge daunting task, but it was a really great assignment because it helped me think deeper about the concepts going on in my work and what I was actually preoccupied with and what concerned me, essentially.
I was in Amsterdam at the time, and I visited your show, and I didn't only see the photographs that you were showing, you also had a little sort of an installation where you would have to, as a visitor, you would have to lie down and look up to the sky and see some video footage material that you shot. So you started working with the room of an exhibition quite early.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I figured I've really grown up in this time and in this age where the image has been so native to the screen, right, to the digital space. And so being given an opportunity to do a sort of exhibition in 3D space, right, with a white cube, I immediately thought that this experience, or that this exhibition, needs to be curtailed to using all the corners and all the elements of a white cube. And so I started to think about the possibility of making installation video. Again, I mentioned I started as a filmmaker. And so that installation that you're talking about, Idyllic Space, is a video work in which, the viewer is prompted to sort of lay on the ground and look up towards the projected video on the ceiling, and it's thinking about these relationships of dreaming, of like daydreaming, of staring up at the ceiling, but also of the historic relationships of viewer to subject, right? And sort of the radicality of viewing sort of Black bodies enjoying public space above you, right? And so all of those, you know, notions are there in that work. And I think it was an amazing opportunity for me to be given, again, exhibition space to engage it in that way. It was new, rather than just thinking about photographs on a wall or what have you.
I mean, the fact that you're mentioning it, that you're showing young Black people daydreaming, it's sort of this atmosphere of a Black utopia, and you've been talking about this term a lot. What do you actually mean by this term, by Black utopia?
I mean, I think it has a sort of double meaning, right? Because I think it's a good question. Utopia, by definition, is sort of this level of perfection in society that is unreachable, right? That is sort of it's perfect, but we know that utopia is not reachable. But I'm interested in photography's possibility, you know, to create a sort of self-contained world in which a lot of these freedoms, right, for young Black people in America are very possible. So I'm interested in the possibility. I'm interested in the denied possibilities. I'm interested in all the realities that are happening around the world. Like, a lot of my images are of, you know, as we can see on the screen here, which I'm sharing, you know, they are of Black families and young Black folks enjoying public space in different ways, whether it's flying kites or wading into a riverside or, you know, enjoying a simple picnic together. So I'm thinking about all of these seemingly banal pleasures. But yeah, I guess that's what I mean by utopia.
I mean, of course, since the pandemic hit, the Black Lives Matter movement reacted last year to the horrific murder of George Floyd. How was your reaction at the time, and how do you see your work in that sort of political frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think my reaction was very similar to Black people around the world's reaction, which is sort of, personally, I didn't know what to do with this continued, you know, trauma and grief, other than continue making the work that I make. You know, I always say that, like, the work that I make is sort of, in a way, I released a book in the fall of last year, which is called I Can Make You Feel Good, the same title of the 2 solo presentations I had in Amsterdam and in New York. And the book was a real space that I found that people, especially last year, could really release and reprieve and escape away from these sort of extremities of images of Black life that we were seeing all over the news, especially last year, but throughout time, right? And so the work that I make is sort of, you know, it's of this moment, of course, because I'm a young person, I'm a young Black American person living in the world today, but it's also not of this moment in a way, because these are concerns that I've been thinking of for the past 4, 5, 6 years. And so I think because this moment has happened upon us, which hopefully I would like to hope is bringing about some important change, you know, my work exists in this space where I offer a narrative, or I offer images, or I offer artworks that allow the space for Black people to just exist in communion with one another, rather than exist on these extremes of trauma and death and extreme heroism and sort of like over and over correction, right? These are sort of about the banalities I'm enjoying, everyday pleasures.
And overreaction would also be problematic, because it would be too much, you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's a complicated thing, but, you know, there is certainly something to be said about extremes in any one direction. And I think moderation is sort of the personal philosophy I tend to believe in, you know, like an overcorrection of something is also problematic, like you're saying it can be.
Maybe you can share some more of your photographs with us, so we can have a visual idea of your Black utopia you're talking about.
Yeah, are you seeing me sharing my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll just keep going through. I mean, I'm thinking about, this is an installation image from my recent show in New York. I'm thinking about printing on fabrics, right? And also fabrics playing a role in the work in relationship to the Black body and to young Black men, right? The gingham fabric, the red and white fabric seen here is, you know, a historically, specifically Southern fabric that makes reference to picnics, to bucolic and pastoral sort of good times in fields, right? And picnics. And I hear him like literally printing those images onto, and dye sublimating them onto fabrics, making reference to laundry lines, to workers, to proverbial domestic space, to just a narrative moment of what it means for families to hang their laundry out in their yards or on their porches or what have you. I'm thinking about family relationships here. And I can keep going if you want,
yes,
Christoph.
Please. Yeah, please go ahead. I mean, it's you know, the emotions that you evoke from those pictures are really sort of what you're talking about, the Black utopian vision of how Black lives can be presented in public. I mean, as you say, usually we're talking about extremes, and they might not be the reality we're talking about. Or,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, also. The solo show that is on in New York at the moment is your way of coping with the topic of the Black American family. Maybe you can show us some examples from that work and tell us what this show is all about.
Yeah. So I'll quickly talk about this particular work. I just recently opened two new bodies of work, or two shows with two new bodies of work. This body of work, which I've been sort of scrolling through here, is a body of work called Dreaming in Real Time, which thinks about sort of specifically the American South. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm sort of thinking through Black people's historic and contemporary relationships to a Southern land, essentially, which is why you sort of see these wide landscapes in which Black people are sort of populating the space and sort of enjoying themselves and commanding the space. And so that's that body of work. And a second body of work that I recently opened, which I'll get to down further here, not to skip over all these images, but this body of work, which I've recently opened at the Gordon Parks Foundation. If anybody knows Gordon Parks, legendary photographer, working through I believe the 40s until the early 2000s, or 50s until the early 2000s, making tons and tons of work. But I zoomed in on how he knew the importance of visualizing the Black family unit. And he worked in Alabama, he worked in Fort Scott, Kansas, he worked in Brazil, he worked in Harlem, photographing Black families. And so in this body of work, I'm thinking specifically about the centrality of domestic space, of visualizing the power of Black family, and of visualizing togetherness, right? And thinking about keepsakes here, always thinking of you. You have a mother, you have a grandmother, a daughter, and a granddaughter, all together in one image. You have generations, father and a son. Yeah.
Sort of, I mean, you've mentioning the fact that you grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Can you tell us a little bit about the way you grew up there? I mean, Atlanta is sort of, we always have this idea of a big city, but it's really sort of a combination of many smaller towns, right?
Totally. I would say it's like the LA of the South in a way. It's sort of like spread out. It is the metropolis of the South for sure, and sort of the capital of the South, if you will. But it has a lot of sort of rolling suburbs, and it actually has the largest amount of nature and trees of any metropolis in the US. So I really wanted to highlight that. A lot of my work thinks about the pastoral and about nature and sort of offering up a different narrative of what we know as this sort of Southern metropolis. But also in these pictures, I'm thinking about, I grew up, again, in the suburbs of Atlanta, so about 30 minutes outside Atlanta. I'm also thinking about, I grew up middle class. And so I'm thinking about this representation, right, which we very rarely see, which is about simply a Black home ownership, right? And sort of heritage behind that, and sort of the staging of a living room as a sort of theater in a certain way. You know, you have the living room you live in, and then you have the living room you don't live in, full of the cherished belongings that you sort of show people, but that you don't actually engage with. And that I sort of view that living room as a sort of theater and a site where we stage our desires, our memories, and what we long for and our aspirations. And I think, yeah, that's what's going on in this body of work.
I was just saying that you're still only 26 years old, so you grew up in like the modern contemporary America and also the modern contemporary media world. I mean, how did you actually become a photographer and a filmmaker? How did that actually happen growing up in the suburb that you were just telling us about?
Yeah, well, it's such a funny path because basically, you know, growing up in a family, a great family, but no one in my family was sort of artistic or an artist at all. I really found my way to the camera through skateboarding, which is sort of a funny way when you think about it, but is a natural portal to creativity.
Why is that? Because I mean, there's many filmmakers like Spike Jonze, for example. I mean, they used to be skaters, and then turned themselves into filmmakers. Why is that there's such a natural combination?
There's really an art form behind there's a history and an art form behind filming the sport of skateboarding. You know, filming skateboarding becomes this real culture and the subculture where it's really about the creativity behind how you shoot the sport of skateboarding, how you edit the montages together. So Spike Jonze is a great example of this. Bill Strobeck is another. There are several skateboard filmmakers who are, I view, artists in their own right and sort of understand the power of images. And so I just sort of followed that yellow brick road. I became obsessed with skateboarding. I became obsessed with filmmaking and filming skateboarding. And then I sort of evolved into moving into being accepted into the film school at NYU Tisch. I moved up to New York and sort of from there began to think deeper and deeper about my own identity through images and sort of arriving at the work I'm making now.
A couple of years ago, we did a special issue of ZEITmagazin together, where you sort of showed us your vision of Black Utopia, and we worked very closely with this issue. It's a rare issue now. I mean, people are trying to get a copy of this. I've been still getting emails from your many fans. And at the time, we did a conversation for the interview that you can still find online for the issue, where you told me that a trip to Cuba was quite essential to the way you became a filmmaker and photographer.
Yeah, totally. You know, halfway through school, again, in film school, halfway through, I decided, you know, at that time, Americans could not travel at all to Cuba without a sort of special artist visa or another reason to travel. And I decided, you know, there was an exchange program offered that was documentary photography through NYU. And I decided what better a chance to go to sort of a place that you are unable to go to than through this program. And so I got down there not thinking of myself as a documentary photographer, but, you know, just thinking of myself as sort of a filmmaker and someone obsessed with images. Got down there and, you know, my teacher down there sort of said, all right, I'd like to see everybody's work. And first of all, I just fell in love with Havana as a place, as an aesthetic place, as a place with tons of Black life, right? Because you think about Afro-Cuban identity, it's a mixture of African and Latin sort of cultures, and just the pastel walls and the architecture all sort of, I think, informed the colors in my work today. But also my teacher there, basically said, all right, I'd like to see everybody's pre-existing pictures. Doesn't matter if they're amateur, doesn't matter if they're iPhone pictures. I just want to understand everybody's sensibilities. And the only images I had were sort of casual portraits I had taken of friends in New York. And my teacher at the time identified them sort of as fashion portraits. He said, it looks like you've sort of fashioned these people and styled them out of your closet and you've dressed them, right? And I said, well, yeah, but I didn't know anything properly about, I don't know, what it means to shoot for Gucci or for Prada or any of these other things. But it did pique my interest in the possibility of doing that. And so that trip was really instrumental for me.
I just mentioned when I introduced you that you became this like star of photography from one second to the other for the public. At the time, you'd been photographing for 5 or 6 years. You'd been in the business for a long time when you shot Beyonce. What was that moment like? When did you realize that this would be such a big thing?
Yeah, I really appreciate that acknowledgement, Christoph, because, you know, the work that I've been doing has been sort of a cross-pollination of many things. You know, it maybe began in Cuba, but I was thinking about so many ideas, I guess, through my work. Like, I'm very, like, I guess I became to get known as this photographer that was very concerned with many things. I was photographing musicians. I was photographing, again, still skateboarders. I was photographing fashion, but I was also photographing politics in a way. I was commissioned to photograph Emma Gonzalez, who is a young gun reform activist and survivor of Marguerite Herman Douglas Parkland shooting. Yeah. And so that was for the cover of Teen Vogue. So I think I became this voice in the space that had many concerns. And so the Vogue Commission specifically became an intersection of all of those things, right? Of history, of music, of fashion, and sort of this conversation.
Last year, I think you spent a few months in London, and you worked with Harry Styles.
Yes.
What was he like?
He was great. It's been a great pleasure in general to be able to work with, I mean, truly some of the world's like most talented and like smartest and greatest folks. Harry is one of those people. He's one of those very humble, amazing people to work with. And also being in London, I got to meet and work with and photograph Michaela Cole, another prodigious Black genius, TV writer and director and star. And so, that was I mean, both of those commissions, among others, like Beyonce and like Kamala Harris, have been a huge honor, basically, to have been asked to do.
What are you working on right now? I mean, I guess you can't tell us about the new projects, but what is the situation right now? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, no, it's like, I was telling Christoph earlier, like, I'm sort of between things in a way. These new bodies of work have just opened. I'll keep scrolling through the images as I sort of wrap up here. But these new bodies of work, which I've been working on for over 2 years, have just sort of opened in their respective gallery spaces. And so now I'm just in between things, sort of hunting and gathering and thinking about, what new body work I'm going to make. So hopefully continuing to cultivate a gallery museum practice and potentially some more film projects.
So this is like the sofa is a very good example if you want to jump back to that to that piece of work of yours, because it shows how you kind of play with the situation, like its interior and its photography.
Totally. Yeah, I'm really thinking about memory. I'm thinking about weaving photography into domestic gestures. I'm thinking about bringing photography closer to sculpture, right? And the inspiration for this actually came from, in a funny way, from Paul Thomas Anderson's movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, Phantom Thread, where there's a scene where Daniel Day-Lewis is talking about his mother, and he's talking about, oh, you can sew anything into the canvas of a coat. I always keep my mother with me.
Yes, I remember that scene, yeah.
And he was like, I have a picture of her with me. And I was like, wow, I just think about the power of family and the idea of keeping things with you. And I just started to ask the question, what if you could print photographs onto the upholstery of a couch? And what does that mean? And what do those memories like live in our everyday objects, So that's these sort of gestures.
That's a fantastic movie about this obsessive fashion designer, right?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you've been working with fashion designers. I mean, is there any relationship with this character with reality?
I think it's like a heightened reality. I think any of them are capable of becoming Reynolds Woodcock, the character in the film. And I think fashion designers like myself are amazing to work with. Jonathan Anderson is a designer who I have been lucky to form a close relationship with, and is also an art collector and amazing sort of knowledgeable art obsessive, so to say. But he is an obsessive nonetheless, and Reynolds Woodcock in that movie, Daniel Day-Lewis, is an obsessive, and I think the best people at their crafts are sort of obsessives. They sort of love what they do.
How do your parents react to your work? I mean, they're proud of you showing, giving Black Americans the public spaces that they might not have had in the past?
I think they're extremely proud. I mean, I think they'd have to speak for themselves, but I think that from what I gleaned, they're extremely proud of me, and they just sort of want to see me continue, like any parents want to see me continue to make work and be happy and all of those other great things. Mm-hmm.
So as we're getting a little bit closer to the end of our conversation, I would just, would like to know about your perspective on America today. We've been hearing in the last couple of days, we've been hearing news of Joe Biden being in a crisis situation. How do you see America at the moment and the future that your country is leading to?
You know, one thing about like being an artist in America is like there's like so many funny pendulum swings in the experience of like making work here. You know, one moment things seem potentially optimistic, the other it seems like doomsday, and certainly in a global pandemic, it seems more like the latter than the former. But I will say, like, as like somewhat of an optimist myself, like I am happy about the circle of young people, like my friends and my extended creative community, and what we're making right now and how we're thinking about what it means to be, don't know, American, a global citizen, et cetera. Like as things continue to globalize, like I'm very much looking towards aesthetics and art to sort of tell a sublime story about our way of being. And I think like so many friends are doing an amazing job of that. So I'm very happy about the artistic production happening in America right now.
I also like the fact that when we did the special photography issue for ZEITmagazin together, at some point during the production process, you said, oh, you know, I would love to show not only my own work, but also work of Black American photographers from older generations, because their work has not been on display for a long time.
Nope, exactly. Yeah. We carved out a little section for the work of Roy de Carava, who I honestly didn't know whether he had much of a presence in Germany, right, or if he had much notoriety in Germany, but was interested in highlighting and creating this dialogue between the predecessors who paved the way for me to even be able to do an issue of ZEITmagazin, right? Which a prestigious, you know, that annual photography issue that you guys do, a hugely prestigious space. It's like, would that even be possible without someone like Roy de Carava, right? And so, you know, just highlighting him and being able to, and also I've become close with Wendy and Sherry from sort of his estate, his foundation. Like, it's just like, I feel lucky, you know? So it was a great opportunity to just like highlight one of a pantheon of Black image makers and artists.
What's your view on the state of photography in general at the moment? What's your take on the situation of photography?
You know, like I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been sort of digging and looking for inspiration. It's become tough in a way to acknowledge the ways in which it's changed, because certainly in terms of proper, like maybe artistic photography or aesthetically inclined photography or sort of creative photography, as I'll put it, things have absolutely changed because of things like Instagram, you know, things have absolutely, and I'm certainly a part of this generation of understanding how those things have changed. But so in a weird way, it's harder to find inspiration because things in a certain sense have become very homogenized. But in another way, it's been exciting, just the internet's ability for us to like look to the past. Like there's a page called Black Archives, which is always digging up amazing photography and photographers from random libraries that we would have never seen of, even like the way Black people lived in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And so, and beyond, you know, and so I think there's fun things in history being dug up right now. But I'm also aware of the sort of homogenization of aesthetics as well.
I know that, so the homogenization of aesthetics, like, can you give us an example in which way this is happening? Because we all look at the same Instagram accounts, is that?
Yeah, exactly. Like we're basically like looking at the same stuff and sort of making stuff in response to the same stuff. But, you know, again, like I was saying, there's also, if you're able to like dig into some corners of your own interest, like there's still so many image makers out there making forward-thinking things, you know?
I'm obviously still trying to get you to Germany at one point. We've been talking about this for quite a while, so I'm really looking forward to welcome you, come to Germany, and you know, maybe also work again together for ZEITmagazin. Tyler, I mean, it's been such a pleasure having you here. And thank you so much. And I mean, you've photographed so many, you know, fascinating people already. Is there someone out of those people that you haven't photographed yet and you would like to?
Oh, there's tons. I mean, you know, there's tons of people. I have a list somewhere in my phone, but I mean, I would love to photograph tons of people.
Where's your phone? Can we have a look at your phone?
I need to go digging, but I think like Frank Ocean is one, you know, but also like my friends, like I would love to photograph my friend Tai, who has amazing face and sort of just has an interesting life. And I'm curious like about all sorts of people, or even photographing other artists, you know, like Arthur Jaffa, or, you know, there are lots of people that I'd love to sort of just share a moment with. And I'm actually doing a shoot with some exciting people later today. So
okay.
Yeah,
I was just making notes about the names you just mentioned. So I'll get back to you about these. Also, Wolfgang, who's watching our conversation, just wants you to know that he has no question, Tyler. He just wants to thank you for sharing your view and thoughts. Great. Keep your good work up.
You talking about Wolfgang Tillmans?
Well, I don't know his second name, but if it is Wolfgang Tillmans, I'll let him know as well.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering. So that must have been a chat on Zoom or something.
Yeah. Someone who's watching our show. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, I appreciate that.
So thanks a lot again for taking your time for this wonderful conversation, and good luck for the shoot later today. I would love to see it soon, and talk to you soon. And thank you again. Bye, Tyler.
Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.